At my company, power wasn't measured in titles but in who you married. When our CEO returned from his extended vacation, he didn't come to my office first. His wife did, with a smile that cost more than my car. She said, "I think this position would suit me better. Too bad I didn't just have a chair I held the keys to $400 million in revenue compliance, and I knew exactly when to pull them out. My name is Lauren Hartley, and for 13 years, I built something most people couldn't see, but everyone depended on the invisible foundation that kept Verigenics from becoming another cautionary tale in the biotech graveyard. At 44, I wasn't the face on our company brochures or the voice in shareholder meetings. I was the one who made sure those pretty faces had something legal to sell. The compliance framework I created wasn't sexy. It didn't trend on LinkedIn or get featured in TechCrunch, but it kept $400 million flowing through our accounts without a single federal investigation, FDA warning letter, or class action lawsuit. In biotech, that's not just competence, it's magic. I'd survived 3 CEOs, 2 mergers, and one particularly nasty whistleblower situation that could have buried us all. My office on the 14th floor wasn't the corner suite, but it had something better a view of the server room where every audit trail, every certification, every federal approval lived under my watchful eye. I knew where every digital body was buried because I dug most of the graves myself legally, of course. Then Greg Winslow came back from his 6-week executive wellness retreat in Turks and Caicos with more than just a tan. He brought Clarissa. Clarissa Winslow, née Morrison, was 36 years old and had pivoted so many times her LinkedIn profile read like a career roulette wheel: fashion blogger, wellness influencer, creative strategist, digital transformation consultant. Now, apparently, she'd landed on her latest incarnation, special advisor on innovation at Verigenics. The title was as manufactured as her cheekbones, but when you're married to the CEO, job descriptions become surprisingly flexible. I first met her at the Monday leadership meeting, 3 days after Greg's return. She walked in wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most employees' monthly salaries, carrying a rose gold laptop I'd never seen on our approved devices list. Security violation number 1, I noted mentally, though I knew it would never matter. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Clarissa," Greg announced, his hand possessively on her lower back. "She'll be joining our leadership team to bring fresh perspectives on operational efficiency." Fresh perspectives. In my experience, that phrase was corporate speak for someone's about to get fired. She took the seat directly across from me, which should have been my first warning. In 13 years of leadership meetings, that chair had always been empty, an unspoken buffer between me and whoever was presenting. But Clarissa didn't know our unwritten rules, or more likely, didn't care. "Lauren," she said, extending a manicured hand across the conference table, "Greg's told me so much about your dedication to process." The pause before dedication was deliberate. So was my smile when I shook her hand. "Process is what keeps us out of federal prison," I replied. "I'm sure you'll find it fascinating." She laughed, a tinkling sound that reminded me of champagne flutes breaking. "Oh, I'm more of a big picture person. I leave the details to people like you." People like me. The phrase hung in the air like a bad smell. Around the table, my colleagues suddenly found their phones very interesting. Even Marcus from legal, who usually backed me up in turf wars, was studying his coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. Over the next 2 weeks, Clarissa embedded herself into Verigenics like a perfectly manicured parasite. She scheduled innovation sessions during my compliance reviews. She hired a team of 20-something digital strategists who walked around with ring lights and talked about disrupting the paradigm. She started appearing in meetings she hadn't been invited to, always with Greg's implicit blessing hovering behind her like an invisible crown. But it wasn't until she asked for access to the compliance dashboard that I knew exactly what game we were playing. "I just want to understand the workflow," she said during a Thursday afternoon ambush in my office. "Greg thinks there might be redundancies we could streamline." I leaned back in my chair, studying her. The afternoon sun caught the subtle work around her eyes. the too smooth forehead that never quite matched her expressions. She was beautiful in that expensive way that required constant maintenance, like a luxury car that depreciated the moment you drove it off the lot. The compliance system requires specific certifications to access, I said. Federal certifications, the kind that take years to earn and maintain. Oh, I'm a quick learner, she said, that champagne flute laugh again. Besides, I'm not looking to replace anyone, just optimize. Replace? The word she claimed she wasn't thinking had somehow made it into the conversation anyway. I smiled and made a note in my phone. Thursday, 3:47 p.m. CW requests system access. When you've spent 13 years building fortress walls, you learn to recognize the sound of someone looking for cracks. The first protocol Clarissa eliminated was the morning verification checklist 47 checkpoints I'd personally designed to catch errors before they became lawsuits. Too rigid, she declared during a Tuesday all-hands meeting. We need to embrace agile thinking, not bureaucratic checkboxes. I watched from the back of the room as half the staff nodded along, seduced by buzzwords and the promise of less work. The other half, the ones who'd been around long enough to remember the Theranos scandal, shot me nervous glances, but I kept my expression neutral, taking notes on my tablet. Tuesday, 10:15 a.m., Protocol 1A eliminated without risk assessment. Within a week, Clarissa's digital strategists had infiltrated my department. Kids fresh out of college with degrees in communications and Instagram follower counts they considered qualifications. The one assigned to shadow me was named Toby, spelled with an I at the end. He insisted, like that made him special. So, what exactly do you do all day? Toby asked, slouching in my office chair while I reviewed FDA submissions, because Clarissa says most of this stuff could probably be automated. I didn't look up from my screen. I make sure the company doesn't accidentally kill people or go to federal prison. It's surprisingly time-consuming. He laughed like I'd made a joke. Yeah, but AI could probably handle most of that now, right? 3 days later, Clarissa announced the creation of a new position, Director of Compliance Innovation. The job description was a masterpiece of corporate nothing-speak, all synergy and transformation with no mention of the actual federal requirements that kept us operational. During the announcement, she stood at the front of the conference room in a white sheath dress, Greg flanking her like a proud parent at a recital. We're not eliminating roles, she assured everyone. We're evolving them. Lauren will transition to a more focused position, process corridor management, allowing her to concentrate on what she does best. Process corridor management. She'd literally renamed my job to make it sound like I managed hallways. That night, I stayed late, using my admin access to explore parts of the system I'd built but rarely visited. Deep in the architecture was something I'd created during the 2015 merger, a backup authentication protocol tied directly to my federal certifications. Back then, I'd been paranoid about losing access during the IT integration. Now, that paranoia looked like foresight. I downloaded everything: audit trails, certification chains, federal approvals, correspondence with regulators, 15 years of digital infrastructure flowing onto an encrypted drive labeled Audit Trail Vault 400M locked. As the progress bar crept forward, I thought about Clarissa's smooth forehead and empty credentials. By month 2, Clarissa had fully colonized the 14th floor. My compliance team was reassigned to her Innovation Lab, where they spent their days creating PowerPoints about reimagining regulatory paradigms instead of actually ensuring regulatory compliance. She'd moved Toby into the desk directly outside my office, now referred to as the Process Corridor Management Suite, on the new org chart. The breaking point came on a Wednesday. I arrived at 7:30 a.m. to find my dashboard access revoked. Oh, that, Toby said when I confronted him, not looking up from his phone. Clarissa said we're migrating to a new system. Something about centralized access points. I'm handling the compliance stuff now. You're handling federal compliance, I repeated slowly. You? The person who asked me last week what FDA stood for. He shrugged. It's not that complicated. Clarissa showed me how to use the templates. Templates for federal compliance. I felt a migraine building behind my left eye. I walked straight to Greg's office, past his assistant's protests, and found him on a video call with investors. He held up a finger weight while continuing to promise double-digit growth. I didn't wait. I dropped my laptop on his desk and pulled up the federal certification requirements. "Your wife just gave control of our compliance system to someone who isn't certified," I said when he finally muted the call. "That's not innovation. That's a federal crime." Greg's face went through several expressions before settling on condescending patience. "Lauren, I understand change is difficult. This isn't about change. This is about prison. Your prison, specifically, when the FDA discovers we're operating without proper oversight. Clarissa assured me she has it handled." Clarissa couldn't handle a lemonade stand's health permit. His face hardened. "I think you need to consider whether you're still a culture fit here." Culture fit, the corporate kiss of death. I picked up my laptop and smiled. "You're right, I should consider that. While I do, you might want to review Section 9.b of my contract, the part about certification ownership." That night, I opened my personal laptop and reviewed the contract I'd negotiated 5 years earlier. Section 9.b was beautiful in its simplicity. In the event of involuntary termination without documented cause, all federal certifications held by the employee shall be deemed null and void within 48 hours of separation. My lawyer had called it overkill at the time. "No one's going to fire you," she'd said. "You literally hold their federal lifeline." I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to paranoia. The working woman's best friend. The beauty of a well-designed system is that it works even when you're not there to run it, especially when you're not there to run it. While Clarissa played CEO's wife dress-up in my department, I spent my newly freed hours doing what I did best, documenting every meeting where she dismissed protocols, every email where she overrode safety checks, every Slack message where her digital strategist joked about compliance theater. I captured it all. My personal laptop became a museum of corporate hubris, each screenshot carefully dated and filed. But I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was creating insurance. Late at night, while Clarissa was probably at charity galas or getting her third facial of the week, I used my hidden admin access to review what Toby was doing with my system. It was worse than I'd imagined. He'd deleted entire verification chains, marking them as redundant bureaucracy in the change logs. He'd set up auto-approvals for documentation that legally required human review. Most damning, he'd been signing off on federal submissions with an electronic signature he'd created by copying mine from old documents. Forgery. Federal forgery, to be specific. I screen-recorded everything, my cursor moving deliberately across each violation like a teacher grading a failing exam. The metadata would show I accessed it at 2:43 a.m. on a Thursday well outside business hours, from my personal IP address. Plausible deniability is a beautiful thing. My official contract printed cleanly on the home printer I'd bought specifically for this moment. Heavy paper, good ink, the kind of presentation that said, "legal document," without screaming it. I highlighted Section 9.b with a yellow marker, old school, the way lawyers liked it. Then I made copies, lots of copies. On Friday morning, I arrived at the office at my usual 7:30 a.m. to find Clarissa sitting in my chair, my actual chair, behind my actual desk, like she'd already measured for new curtains. "Lauren," she smiled that practiced smile. "I was just getting a feel for the space. Greg and I think this office would be perfect for the innovation hub." "It's a nice office," I agreed, setting my box of personal items on the desk. Good light, stable temperature for server access, clean sight lines to both emergency exits. She blinked at the emergency exits comment but rallied. "Well, you won't need to worry about any of that anymore. We found a wonderful new space for you on the 3rd floor. Much more collaborative." The 3rd floor, where they put accounts payable and the people they were hoping would quit. "How thoughtful," I said, pulling my framed certifications off the wall one by one. Certified Regulatory Affairs Professional, Federal Compliance Specialist, Quality Assurance Manager, Advanced Level. Each one represented years of study, thousands of dollars in fees, continuing education credits maintained religiously, Clarissa watched me pack them like they were participation trophies from a kid's soccer league. Soccer. You know, she said, attempting to girl talk, I really admire your dedication to all this paperwork. It must have been so fulfilling, in its way. Past tense. She was already writing my professional obituary. I wrapped the last frame in bubble wrap, taking my time. It has been, especially the federal licensing. Did you know those certifications are personally tied, non-transferable? The FBI takes that very seriously after what happened with Enron. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her Botoxed features. Well, Toby is working on getting certified. He's very bright. I'm sure he is. I sealed the box with tape, the sound sharp in the morning quiet. The next testing window is in 18 months. The wait list is already full, but maybe Greg knows someone. She stood, smoothing her dress. We'll manage. We always do. Yes, I said, hefting my box. You always do. I made one stop before leaving the building, the server room, where the ancient backup system still hummed along, forgotten by everyone except the woman who'd built it. I input a simple command, elegant in its simplicity, a timer, set for 48 hours from the moment my termination went through. When it reached 0, every certification tied to my name would flip from active to void. Every federal approval I'd signed would require re-verification. Every audit trail bearing my electronic signature would flag for review. It wasn't sabotage. It was exactly what my contract specified would happen. I was just making sure the system knew it too. My personal email dinged as I reached my car. The termination notice, sent at 8:15 p.m., right after I'd left the building. They'd probably drafted it days ago, waiting for me to clean out my desk like a good little displaced executive. I forwarded it to my lawyer with a single note, start the clock. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot I'd used for 13 years, watching the building where I'd built my career. Through the 14th floor windows, I could see shadows moving in what used to be my office. Clarissa, probably, maybe Toby, planning their innovative future with all the confidence of people who'd never had to face a federal audit. I pulled up my backup drive on my personal laptop, checking the folders one more time. Everything was there, including a special subfolder I'd labeled Succession Planning. Inside were the emails where Clarissa had explicitly stated she was taking over compliance oversight. The Slack messages where she'd told Toby to just copy Lauren's old signatures, it's all digital anyway. The recorded Zoom call where Greg had said federal regulations were more like guidelines when it came to innovation. 48 hours. They had 48 hours to realize what they'd done. I started my car and drove away, leaving 13 years in the rearview mirror. As I merged onto the highway, my phone buzzed with LinkedIn notifications. Former colleagues, suddenly very interested in keeping in touch now that I was gone. I ignored them all except one, a message from Marcus in legal. Building's going to be interesting Monday morning. Good luck, Lauren. Monday, 3 days after the 48-hour timer expired, when the first federal database updated with my void status, when the first client tried to verify our certifications for their quarterly review, when the first automated flag went up in a regulatory system that had no sense of humor about compliance gaps, I smiled and turned up the radio. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about what you do, it's about what you stop doing. The email announcing my replacement hit the company directory at 9:07 a.m. on Monday. I know because I still had access to the public folder and oversight that spoke volumes about their transition planning. Dear Veragenics family, it began, Greg's voice somehow oozing through the corporate speak. We're thrilled to announce an exciting evolution in our compliance leadership. Clarissa Winslow will be stepping into the role of Chief Innovation and Compliance Officer, bringing her unique vision to modernize our regulatory approach. Chief Innovation and Compliance Officer. They'd invented a title that sounded important while meaning nothing. I screenshot the email from my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me as I added it to my growing collection. The announcement continued with buzzword bingo, synergistic approach, disruptive compliance methodology, next-generation regulatory framework. Not one mention of federal requirements, certification maintenance, or the 100 other details that kept a biotech company from becoming a criminal enterprise. But there was a professional headshot of Clarissa, airbrushed to magazine perfection, smiling like she'd just won a pageant. My lawyer called at 9:30 a.m. "You see the announcement." Hard to miss. Did they send my termination paperwork? Friday at 4:47 p.m., no cause listed, just organizational restructuring. Perfect. And the 48 hours. Expired Sunday at 4:47 p.m. I could hear her smile through the phone. Your certifications should be showing as void in the federal database as of this morning. I pulled up the FDA's verification portal on my laptop, entering my certification number. Status void. Holder terminated. The same message appeared for my EPA credentials, my OSHA qualifications, my DEA licensing, 13 years of maintaining those certifications, and they'd evaporated exactly as my contract specified. Lauren, I have to ask, they do know about Section 95B, right? I mentioned it to Greg. He seemed more concerned about culture fit. Jesus. Okay. Well, I'm keeping my phone on. This should be interesting. By noon, my personal phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers I didn't answer, but I recognized the Verigenics conference room lines. They were probably discovering that innovation couldn't replace federal authorization. The first domino fell at 2:15 p.m., according to Marcus's carefully worded text. Parsons Pharma requesting updated compliance certs for Thursday's shipment. Toby doesn't know what they're talking about. Parsons Pharma, our second biggest client, worth $14 million annually. They required re-verification of our federal status before every major shipment, a requirement I'd negotiated personally after their own compliance scare 3 years ago. I made myself a sandwich and watched my phone light up with calls I didn't answer. Tuesday brought escalation. My LinkedIn showed 57 views from Verigenics employees, including 12 from the C-suite. Clarissa's profile still proudly displayed her new title, but her last post, something about reimagining regulatory paradigms, had comments disabled. At 3:20 p.m., a FedEx truck pulled up to my house. Signature required. Inside was a formal letter from Verigenics Legal, proposing a consulting arrangement to assist with transition matters. The number they offered was insulting, less than half my previous salary for what would clearly be crisis management. I read it twice, appreciating the desperation bleeding through legalese. They'd realized the certification problem but were trying to lowball me, hoping I'd panic about being unemployed. They didn't know about the folder labeled succession planning or the screenshots of Toby forging my signature. I composed my response carefully, CCing my lawyer. Thank you for your offer regarding transition assistance. After reviewing the terms, I must decline. As stated in my employment contract, Section 9.b, all certifications became void upon my termination without cause. Reinstating them would require new applications, which, as you know, involve extensive background checks, documentation of employment status, and proof of continuous oversight. I wish Verigenics the best in navigating this transition. I'm confident Ms. Winslow's innovative approach will find creative solutions to any regulatory challenges. Best regards, Lauren Hartley, former Internal Operations Director. I attached a PDF of Section 9.b, highlighted in yellow, and hit send at 4:59 p.m., just before close of business, just late enough to ruin someone's evening. Wednesday morning, the real panic set in. A friend still at the company forwarded me an all-hands meeting invite. Urgent compliance status update. Mandatory attendance. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., which meant they'd spend all night trying to find a solution that didn't exist. But the best part came in a text from Marcus at 11:43 a.m. Greg just asked if we can hire someone else with your certifications. When I explained they're non-transferable, he asked if we could just not tell anyone you left. I laughed hard enough to scare my cat. The CEO of a publicly traded company had just suggested federal fraud as a solution to the federal fraud his wife had already committed. It was beautiful in its stupidity. By Thursday, my phone had logged 43 missed calls from Verigenics numbers. My email showed increasingly desperate messages from HR, legal, and even Greg himself. The subject lines evolved from transition assistance request to urgent compliance matter to simply, please call ASAP. I didn't call. Instead, I printed every email, organizing them chronologically in a folder labeled Panic Timeline. My lawyer would appreciate the documentation. The crown jewel arrived Thursday night, a 12-page contract for emergency consulting services. They'd quintupled their offer and added a signing bonus. But buried in subsection 3.2 was what they really wanted: immediate reinstatement of my certifications and a retroactive validation of all documents signed in my absence. They wanted me to commit fraud to cover their fraud. The audacity was almost admirable. I opened my laptop and pulled up the screenshot of Toby's forged signatures. Then the email where Clarissa directed him to just make it work. Finally, the Zoom recording of Greg calling federal regulations guidelines. My response was brief. After careful consideration, I cannot in good conscience validate documents I did not review or approve. This would violate federal law and my professional ethics. Additionally, I've become aware that my electronic signature has been used without authorization on federal documents since my departure. My lawyer will be in touch regarding this matter. P.S. Congratulations again to Clarissa on her new role. I'm sure her fresh perspective will be exactly what Verigenics needs. I sent it at 11:58 p.m., imagining Greg's phone lighting up his bedside table just as he was falling asleep. Sometimes timing is everything. Friday morning, I updated my LinkedIn profile. Open to new opportunities in regulatory compliance and quality assurance. Within an hour, I had 3 recruiters in my inbox and a very interesting message from the chief legal officer at Strategen Biocore, Verigenics' biggest competitor. Heard you might be available, she wrote. We value experience and actual certifications. Coffee. I smiled and typed back. Coffee sounds perfect. I know a place that makes excellent documentation. Macchiatos. As I hit send, my phone buzzed with another unknown number. This time, I recognized the area code, the regional FDA office. I let it go to voicemail, already knowing what Monday's news cycle would bring. Revenge, I was learning, didn't require anger or aggression. Sometimes it just required doing exactly what you said you'd do, when you said you'd do it, and then letting math and federal law handle the rest. The FDA voicemail was polite but pointed. Ms. Hartley, this is Director Patricia Norwood from the Regional Compliance Office. We've received automated alerts regarding certification status changes at Verigenics. Please call me at your earliest convenience to discuss your recent employment status and any documents that may require review. I saved the message and forwarded it to my lawyer, with a note, the wheels of federal justice turn slowly, but grind exceedingly fine. Monday arrived with the inevitability of a compliance audit. My morning coffee came with a side of schadenfreude as I watched my phone explode with notifications. The first was from Marcus at 6:45 a.m. FDA on site, full team. Clarissa tried to badge them into the building without signing them in. Security had to intervene. Of course she did. Federal investigators probably loved being treated like Instagram followers who just needed the right access code. By 9 a.m., LinkedIn was lighting up. Does anyone know a compliance specialist with active federal certifications available immediately? Posted by 3 different Verigenics employees. The desperation was palpable, like watching someone try to hire a pilot while the plane was already in the air. My interview with Strategen Biocore was scheduled for 2 p.m. I wore my best suit, the charcoal one that said, I know where the bodies are buried and have the documentation to prove it. Their chief legal officer, Patricia Brennan, met me in a conference room overlooking the harbor. I'll cut to the chase, she said after pleasantries. We've been watching Verigenics' innovations with interest. When I saw you were available, I cleared my calendar. I appreciate directness, I said. What exactly have you been watching? She smiled. Their last 3 quarterly filings showed interesting patterns. Compressed timelines that seemed impossible with proper compliance protocols. Then suddenly their head of compliance leaves and the FDA shows up. One might draw conclusions. One might, though I couldn't comment on any proprietary information. Of course not. But hypothetically, if someone with 13 years of experience building bulletproof compliance systems were available, and if that person happened to have relationships with key clients who value regulatory stability, hypothetically, that person might be very interested in an organization that values expertise over innovation theater. We spent the next hour discussing Stratagen's expansion plans, their commitment to compliance infrastructure, and a salary number that made my poker face work overtime. But the real moment came when she casually mentioned their recent bids for 2 major contracts. Parsons Pharma is looking to diversify suppliers, she said, and Meridian Biological is concerned about vendor stability. Both value impeccable compliance records. Parsons Pharma, my $14 million former client who couldn't get their Thursday shipment verified. The universe had a sense of humor. I left with a job offer and a start date 2 weeks out. Enough time to watch Verigenics implode while maintaining plausible deniability about the timing. Tuesday's news cycle brought the first public hint of trouble. Biopharma Weekly ran a small item, Verigenics faces routine FDA inspection amid leadership changes. Routine. I smiled at the understatement. There was nothing routine about a full compliance audit triggered by cascading certification failures. My phone rang. Greg's personal cell. I let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to his message. Lauren, it's Greg. I think we may have had some miscommunication about your transition. I'd like to discuss a senior advisory role, reporting directly to me. Please call me back. Miscommunication, like firing someone without understanding they were the load-bearing wall holding up your federal authorization. I deleted the message. Wednesday brought escalation. A courier arrived with a new offer, Senior Vice President of Compliance and Regulatory Affairs, reporting to the board, not Greg. The salary was 20% above my old rate, with a signing bonus that suggested panic, but the best part was a handwritten note from Greg. We need you. Name your terms. I photographed the note, adding it to my collection. Then I composed my response. Dear Greg, thank you for your generous offer. However, I've accepted a position with an organization whose values align with my approach to compliance integrity. I noticed the offer includes retroactive authorization for documents signed during my absence. As you know from our previous discussions, this would constitute federal fraud. I trust Clarissa's innovative methods will find a compliant solution. Best wishes. Lauren. Peace. Section 9.b of my contract remains in effect. My lawyer has advised me to preserve all documentation regarding unauthorized use of my credentials. Thursday morning, the dam broke. An anonymous source leaked to Biopharma Weekly that Verigenics had suspended shipping pending compliance reviews. The stock price dropped 12% by noon. My LinkedIn messages included 7 recruiters, 4 former colleagues, just checking in, and one very interesting note from Patricia Norwood at the FDA, thanking me for my professional handling of certification transitions. But the sweetest moment came via a forwarded email from a friend in sales. Parsons Pharma had formally notified Verigenics they were moving their contract to a more stable partner. That partner's announcement would come Monday, my first day at Stratagen. By Friday, Clarissa's LinkedIn profile no longer mentioned her C-suite title. The Chief Innovation and Compliance Officer had quietly become Strategic Advisor, then disappeared entirely by close of business. Her last post about disrupting outdated paradigms had aged like milk in the sun. My exit interview with reality came in the form of a final message from Marcus. Clarissa resigned to pursue other opportunities. Greg asked if you'd consider coming back. I laughed until security asked if I was okay. I spent Friday evening packing my home office, carefully filing 13 years of documentation into boxes labeled by year, each certificate, each training record, each proud accomplishment that Clarissa had deemed replaceable by innovation. They'd learned that expertise wasn't just about knowing the rules, it was about understanding why they existed. My new Stratagen laptop arrived Saturday morning, along with a welcome basket and a handwritten note from Patricia Brennan. looking forward to building something bulletproof together. I opened the laptop and logged into my new email. Already there were messages from Parsons Pharma and Meridian Biological, CCing me on their transition plans. The subject lines were professional, but I could read between the lines. Thank God someone competent is handling this. As I set up my new home office, my personal phone buzzed with one last Verigenics number. This time, I recognized it the CEO's office landline, the one Greg used when he wanted to seem official. I answered on the fourth ring. Lauren, Greg's voice had lost its usual executive timbre. I wanted to apologize personally for how things were handled. I appreciate that, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Is there any chance, any possibility you'd consider consulting on the FDA situation, just to help us through the audit? I looked at my new Stratagen laptop, then at the box of certifications I'd earned over 13 years. I'm afraid that would be a conflict of interest with my new position, but I'm sure Clarissa's fresh perspective will innovate a solution. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. She didn't understand, he finally said. The complexity, the requirements, the fact that compliance isn't optional, I suggested. Yes. Well, that's a shame, but I'm sure Toby can figure it out. He seemed very confident when he took over my dashboard access. Another silence. Then the FDA found forged signatures. I said nothing. Sometimes silence is the loudest response. Lauren, Greg, I need to go. I have preparations to make for Monday. Good luck with the audit. I hung up before he could respond, then blocked the number. Some bridges weren't worth maintaining, even for the satisfaction of watching them burn. Monday morning, I would walk into Stratagen BioCore with my certifications fully reinstated under their sponsorship, my reputation intact, and 2 major clients following me through the door. Clarissa would be back to influencing whatever crowd still followed her Instagram stories about manifesting success. And Verigenics. They'd learn what happened when you replaced expertise with aesthetics, process with PowerPoints, and federal compliance with fresh perspectives. The $400 million lesson was just beginning. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it to Section 9. The beautiful, boring contract clause that proved sometimes the best revenge was simply following the rules. The fallout from a failed FDA audit moves at the speed of bureaucracy, slow, methodical, and absolutely devastating. While I settled into my corner office at Stratagen, complete with a view of the city skyline instead of server rooms, Verigenics was drowning in federal paperwork and frozen assets. My new assistant, Daniel, knocked on my door Tuesday morning. Ms. Hartley, you have a visitor. Says it's personal. I looked up from the Meridian Biological transition documents to find Greg Winslow standing in my doorway. He'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. The executive polish was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man whose board was circling like sharks. 5 minutes, he said. Please. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, noting how he took in the framed certifications already hanging on my walls, the same ones Clarissa had watched me pack like relics from an outdated past. Nice office, he said, attempting small talk. It has excellent compliance infrastructure. What do you want? Greg. He pulled out a folder, thick with legal documents. The FDA is recommending criminal charges, fraud, forgery, conspiracy to circumvent federal regulations. I'm aware. It was in Biopharma Weekly. They want to hold me personally liable, pierce the corporate veil. My lawyers say with your testimony. Stop. I held up a hand. If you're here to ask me to lie to federal investigators, you should leave now. Not lie, he said quickly. Just contextualize. Explain that the signatures were a misunderstanding, that Clarissa didn't realize that forging federal documents was illegal. That's quite a misunderstanding. He slumped in the Italian leather chair that probably cost more than most people's cars. She's left me. Clarissa moved back to California last week. Said this wasn't what she signed up for when she married me. I maintained my poker face, though internally I was updating my Schadenfreude spreadsheet. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you... His laugh was bitter. She destroyed my company in 3 months, 30 years of building Verigenics, and she reduced it to a fraud investigation because she thought compliance was beneath her. She thought I was beneath her, I corrected. Compliance was just collateral damage. Greg rubbed his face, and for a moment, I saw past the CEO facade to the chemical engineer who'd started Verigenics in his garage. What would it take for you to help? I leaned back, studying him. You want my help? Full immunity for me in writing from the DOJ, acknowledgement that I warned you about Section 9B, written statement that I was terminated without cause, and that all subsequent compliance failures occurred after my departure, and a public apology. A public apology. In Biopharma Weekly, full page, explaining that Verigenics' compliance failures stemmed from dismissing experienced leadership in favor of unqualified personnel based on personal relationships. His face flushed. That's humiliation. No, that's accountability. Humiliation is your wife asking me if managing federal compliance ever made me feel fulfilled while she planned to steal my job. He stood abruptly. You're enjoying this. I'm enjoying my new position at a company that values expertise. What happens to Verigenics is just gravity. I didn't push you off the cliff, Greg. I just stopped holding the rope. He left without another word, shouldering past Daniel, who watched him go with raised eyebrows. Old colleague, Daniel asked. Former employer, could you pull the Parsons Pharma files? We have a call at 2 p.m. about expanding their contract. The expansion call went beautifully. Parsons was increasing their order by 40%, explicitly citing confidence in Stratagen's compliance infrastructure as the reason. I scheduled the federal re-verification for their shipments, my reinstated certifications sliding through the system like butter. That evening, my lawyer forwarded me an email from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They wanted to schedule a deposition about my time at Verigenics, specifically regarding the transition period and any knowledge of fraudulent signatures. Tell them I'm happy to cooperate, I replied. I have extensive documentation. Wednesday brought news that Verigenics stock had dropped another 23%. Trading was halted twice. The board announced an emergency meeting, closed to shareholders, which in corporate speak meant someone was getting fired. Marcus texted me that night, Greg's out, board voted no confidence. They're bringing in a crisis management team. I poured myself a glass of the good wine, the stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. Getting rid of Greg felt worth the 2018 vintage. Thursday's Biopharma Weekly included a small item buried on page 12. Former Verigenics executive Clarissa Winslow launches wellness consulting firm in Los Angeles. The accompanying headshot showed her in soft focus, promoting holistic approaches to life transitions, from Chief Innovation Officer to Instagram life coach in 3 weeks. The pivot was almost impressive. But Friday brought the real prize, a full-page advertisement in Biopharma Weekly, exactly as I'd demanded. Greg's public apology, co-signed by the board. Verigenics acknowledges that recent compliance failures resulted from the dismissal of qualified leadership and the installation of unvetted personnel based on personal relationships rather than professional qualifications. We specifically apologize to Ms. Lauren Hartley, whose 13 years of exemplary service were disregarded in favor of an approach that prioritized style over substance. The resulting federal investigation serves as a reminder that in biotech, expertise is not optional, it is essential. I framed it, not out of pettiness mostly, but as a reminder that sometimes the best response to being undervalued is to become indispensable somewhere else. My first month at Stratagen ended with a company celebration. We'd successfully onboarded both Parsons and Meridian, added 3 more clients fleeing Verigenics' uncertainty, and passed our federal recertification with 0 findings. Patricia Brennan raised a champagne toast to expertise, experience, and the extremely thorough documentation that keeps us all out of federal prison. The room laughed, but I noticed several newer employees taking notes. Good. They were learning that compliance wasn't about killing innovation. It was about ensuring innovation didn't kill anyone else. As I packed up my office that evening, My phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Toby with an I had updated his profile. No longer at Verigenics, now seeking opportunities in social media management and brand awareness. I thought about messaging him, maybe offering some career advice about the importance of understanding what you're signing your name to, but then I remembered him slouching in my chair. Dismissing 13 years of expertise with AI could probably handle that. Instead, I closed LinkedIn and opened my calendar. Monday's schedule was packed with real-work federal submissions, client meetings, a training session for junior compliance staff who actually wanted to learn the job. The revenge wasn't in watching Verigenics burn. It wasn't even in the superior salary or the corner office or the public apology suitable for framing. It was in the simple satisfaction of being valued for exactly what I was irreplaceable. Well, that and the FBI raid, but I wouldn't hear about that until Monday. The 12-page consulting contract from Greg arrived at my home on Saturday morning, delivered by a courier who insisted on a signature. I signed for it, amused that he was still trying to buy his way out of federal charges with paper and promises. I read it over coffee, appreciating the desperation baked into every clause. Triple my previous salary for advisory services, retroactive validation of all compliance documents, a confidentiality agreement so broad it would effectively gag me from ever speaking about Verigenics again, and buried in subsection 7.3.2, the real ask I would testify that all signatures were administratively authorized under my supervision. They wanted me to perjure myself for money. The number was impressive enough to retire on if invested wisely. But then I looked at my wall of certifications, each one representing a promise to uphold federal standards, not auction them to the highest bidder. I scanned the contract and forwarded it to my lawyer with a simple note, "More evidence for your collection." Her response came within minutes. Jesus Christ, they just put conspiracy to obstruct justice in writing. Are they trying to make the prosecutor's job easier? I composed my reply to Greg carefully, CCing his legal team and mine. Miss Winslow, thank you for your generous offer dated Saturday. After thorough review, I must decline for the following reasons. 1. The contract requests I provide false testimony to federal investigators, which constitutes perjury and obstruction of justice. 2. Subsection 7.3.2 explicitly asks me to claim supervision over documents I never reviewed, approved, or knew existed until after my termination. 3. The retroactive validation clause would require me to violate my professional certifications in federal law. I have forwarded this contract to the U.S. Attorney's Office as evidence of attempted witness tampering. I suggest you seek competent legal counsel who can explain why putting felony solicitation in writing is inadvisable. As previously stated, I am happy to provide truthful testimony about my tenure at Verigenics, including all warnings given about compliance requirements and the circumstances of my termination. Lauren Hartley, Chief Compliance Officer, Stratagon Biocore. I sent it at 11:59 p.m., imagining it ruining someone's Sunday morning golf game. By Monday, news of the contract had leaked. Verigenics' attempts to buy silence from key witness ran on the front page of BioPharma Weekly's digital edition. My phone rang off the hook with reporters wanting statements. I directed them all to my lawyer, who was having the time of her life giving no comments that somehow said everything. Tuesday brought my deposition with the federal prosecutors, 3 attorneys, 2 FBI agents, and a court reporter in a conference room that smelled like government coffee and justice. I'd brought 3 bankers' boxes of documentation, each folder meticulously labeled and cross-referenced. Ms. Hartley, the lead prosecutor began, can you explain your role at Verigenics? For 4 hours, I walked them through 13 years of building compliance infrastructure, every system, every protocol, every safety measure I'd implemented to keep the company legal. The prosecutors took notes like students in the world's most expensive classroom. Now regarding your termination, the prosecutor continued, can you describe the circumstances? I pulled out the folder labeled Transition Communications and spread its contents across the table. Emails, contracts, screenshots, The crown jewel, a printed copy of Clarissa's announcement that she was taking over compliance because they needed fresh perspectives. Mrs. Winslow had no federal certifications, the prosecutor asked. She had a lifestyle blog and a marriage certificate. One of the FBI agents unsuccessfully tried to turn a laugh into a cough. And the signatures that appeared on federal documents after your departure. I opened the folder labeled Fraudulent Activities and pulled out the screenshots I'd taken during my late-night system reviews. These are my authentic signatures from 2019 through 2024. I laid out a comparison sheet. These are the signatures that appeared on documents filed after my termination. As you can see, someone attempted to copy them digitally. Who had access to create these signatures? According to the system logs, Toby Morrison, who reported directly to Clarissa Winslow. Here's the email chain where she instructed him to make it work when he expressed concerns about certification requirements. The prosecutors exchanged glances. One whistled low. They put it in writing. Innovation culture apparently extends to creative documentation. We broke for lunch, during which my lawyer texted me, "You're doing great. They're taking notes like you're giving them the answers to the final exam." The afternoon session focused on Greg's knowledge and involvement. I was surgical with the truth, yes. I'd warned him about Section 9B. Yes, he'd been informed that Clarissa's takeover would void federal authorizations. Yes, he'd chosen to proceed anyway because of culture fit. "This consulting contract you received," the prosecutor said, sliding my forwarded copy across the table. "Can you explain what they were asking you to do?" "Lie," I said simply. They wanted me to claim I'd supervised and authorized documents I'd never seen, signed by someone impersonating my credentials, during a period when I no longer worked there. That's perjury, obstruction, and conspiracy rolled into one billable hour. "Did you consider accepting?" "I considered calling the FBI directly, but my lawyer suggested forwarding it to you instead. Better chain of custody." By 4 p.m., we'd covered everything. The prosecutors thanked me for my cooperation and my documentation. As I packed up my boxes, the lead prosecutor shook my hand. "Ms. Hartley, I have to say, this is the most organized evidence I've ever seen in a corporate fraud case." "I spent 13 years in compliance," I replied. "Documentation is my love language." Wednesday morning, the FBI raid hit Verigenics like a tsunami in business casual. Marcus sent me play-by-play texts from the parking lot where employees had been evacuated. 7:45 a.m., black SUVs everywhere. 8:10 a.m., they're wheeling out servers. 8:45 a.m., someone said they have a warrant for Greg's house too. 9:15 a.m., Clarissa just pulled up in an Uber, took one look and left. I put my phone on silent and focused on my actual job ensuring Stratagen's expansion continued smoothly while our biggest competitor imploded. Professional satisfaction had never tasted so sweet. By Thursday, the arrests started. Greg Winslow on charges of conspiracy to defraud, obstruction, and false statements. Toby Morrison for forgery and fraud. They were both released on bail, but their passports were confiscated. The image of Greg doing the perp walk in his handmade Italian suit was, I'll admit, saved to my personal folder of karmic justice. Clarissa wasn't arrested yet, but sources told BioPharma Weekly she was cooperating fully with investigators. The wellness influencer had pivoted again, this time to potential witness for the prosecution. Her Instagram went private, but not before someone screenshotted her last post about choosing authenticity in challenging times. Friday brought an unexpected visitor to Stratagen, Patricia Norwood from the FDA, the same director who'd left me that first voicemail. "Ms. Hartley," she said, settling into my office chair, "I wanted to thank you personally. Your documentation and testimony have been invaluable." "Just doing my job, the one I'm actually certified for." She smiled. "We're recommending Stratagen for our expedited approval program. Your compliance infrastructure is exemplary. We try to keep innovation and federal law in the same room, not a contentious divorce. Speaking of which," she leaned forward, "we're developing new guidelines for certification transfers and employment verification. Would you be interested in joining the advisory committee?" I agreed immediately. If my experience could prevent another Clarissa from innovating her way into federal prison, it was worth the extra meetings. That evening, I updated my LinkedIn profile to reflect the FDA committee appointment. Within minutes, the congratulations poured in, including a message from someone unexpected: Greg's first wife. "Thank you," she wrote. "He left me for a younger woman, too. 15 years ago. Watching karma catch up has been therapeutic. Enjoy your success, you've earned every bit of it." I poured myself a glass of wine and looked out at the city lights from my office window. Somewhere out there, Greg was probably meeting with lawyers, desperately trying to shift blame. Clarissa was likely rebranding herself again, perhaps as a cautionary tale speaker. And Toby, probably updating his resume to remove any mention of compliance innovation. But I wasn't thinking about them. I was thinking about Monday's schedule: real work with real purpose at a company that valued expertise over aesthetics. The revenge was complete not because they'd fallen, but because I'd risen. My phone buzzed with one last message from Marcus. "New CEO starts Monday. First agenda item, rebuilding compliance from scratch. They're budgeting for a team of 12. Guess some lessons are expensive. 12 people to replace one." I smiled and raised my glass to Section 9B, the gift that kept on giving. 2 weeks later, I stood at the podium at the National Biotech Compliance Summit, looking out at an audience of 500 professionals who'd paid good money to hear about the Verigenics collapse. My presentation was titled, "When Innovation Meets Regulation, a Case Study in Compliance Catastrophe." I clicked to my first slide a screenshot of Clarissa's LinkedIn declaring her the Chief Innovation and Compliance Officer. A knowing murmur rippled through the crowd. "Innovation," I began, "is not the enemy of compliance. Ignorance is, arrogance is, and assuming that marriage to the CEO qualifies you to manage federal regulations definitely is." The audience laughed, but it was the nervous laughter of people who'd probably seen similar situations brewing in their own companies. I walked them through the timeline: the systematic dismantling of 13 years of infrastructure, the forged signatures, the 48-hour countdown that ended a $400 million company's reputation. I named no names beyond what was already public record, but I didn't need to. The story told itself. "The cost of non-compliance," I said, clicking to my final slide, "isn't just fines or legal fees. It's the decades of trust destroyed in weeks. It's the employees who lose their jobs because leadership prioritized relationships over expertise. It's the patients who might not get life-saving treatments because a company can no longer operate." During the Q&A, a young compliance officer raised her hand. "What advice would you give to someone in a similar situation when leadership doesn't value what we do?" I thought about my 13 years at Verigenics, the late nights ensuring every document was perfect, the systems I'd built that Clarissa had torn down like they were outdated decorations. "Document everything," I said. "Know your worth, and remember, if they don't value your expertise, someone else will. The best revenge against being undervalued isn't anger or sabotage. It's success somewhere else while they discover exactly what they lost." The summit ended with a standing ovation and 17 business cards from companies looking for someone who actually understands compliance. I politely declined them all. Stratagen had earned my loyalty by showing it first. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Lauren." The voice was female, tentative. "This is Clarissa." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. "I wanted to apologize," she continued. "I didn't understand what you did. The complexity, the importance. I thought it was just paperwork and rules." And now, a bitter laugh. "Now I'm facing potential charges for conspiracy. Greg's lawyers are throwing me under the bus, saying I orchestrated everything. My lawyer says cooperating is my only chance to avoid jail time. What do you want from me, Clarissa?" "I guess I wanted to know why you didn't warn me, why you just let me fail." I leaned back in my home office chair, looking at my wall of certifications. "I warned Greg about Section 9B. I told you federal certifications were required. You called my 13 years of experience dedication to process, like it was a quaint hobby. You didn't want warnings, you wanted my office. I was stupid. No, you were arrogant. Stupid can be fixed with education. Arrogance requires consequences. She was quiet for a moment. The FBI agent said your documentation was meticulous, that you could have destroyed us all but only provided evidence of actual crimes. I'm a compliance officer, not a vengeful ex-employee. I follow rules. That's what you never understood. It wasn't about protecting my job. It was about protecting everyone's jobs, the company, the patients, even you, if you'd let me. I'm sorry, she said again. Good luck with your case, Clarissa. I hung up and blocked the number. Some bridges weren't worth rebuilding, even with apologies as construction material. Monday morning brought news that Verigenics had been acquired by a pharmaceutical giant for pennies on the dollar. The buyer's press release emphasized their commitment to rebuilding compliance infrastructure to the highest standards. They'd hired a team of 12 to do what I'd done alone, and rumor had it they were still finding issues I'd prevented from ever existing. My LinkedIn notification showed a familiar name. Toby Morrison had viewed my profile. His own now listed him as a social media consultant in his hometown in Ohio. No mention of his brief stint as a federal compliance officer or the forgery charges he'd pled down to probation and community service. At Stratagon, we'd just landed our biggest contract yet, a $30 million deal with a company explicitly citing our unimpeachable compliance record as the deciding factor. Patricia Brennan announced it at the all-hands meeting with a special thanks to the compliance team for keeping us innovative and legal at the same time. As I packed up that evening, Daniel knocked on my door. Ms. Hartley, I'm applying for the senior compliance analyst position. Could I ask you about career development? I smiled and gestured to the chair. First lesson compliance isn't about saying no to innovation. It's about finding legal ways to say yes. Second lesson, document everything. Third lesson, if someone suggests replacing you with their spouse, update your resume immediately. He laughed, taking notes like I was sharing state secrets. 6 months after leaving Verigenics, I'd helped Stratagon grow by 40% while maintaining perfect federal compliance. My salary had increased by 60%. My team had expanded from 1 to 7, and somewhere in Los Angeles, Clarissa was teaching yoga and posting motivational quotes about resilience. The epilogue wrote itself when BioPharma Weekly ran a feature on the Great Compliance Crisis of 2025. They interviewed me as an expert voice on maintaining regulatory standards during leadership transitions. They interviewed Greg's lawyer about the importance of understanding employment contracts. They tried to interview Clarissa, but she declined through her attorney. The article included a sidebar on Section 9.b clauses and their enforceability. Law firms reported a 300% increase in executives asking about certification ownership. HR departments nationwide suddenly became very interested in verifying actual qualifications before hiring C-suite family members. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, now happily employed at a Verigenics competitor. You started a movement. My new company just added certification protection to all senior compliance contracts. They're calling it the Hartley Clause. I smiled and filed the screenshot in my folder labeled Impact. Not bad for someone whose job Clarissa thought an Instagram influencer could do with the right attitude and a ring light. The truth about revenge is that the best kind doesn't require schemes or sabotage. Sometimes it just requires competence, patience, and a thorough understanding of federal regulations. I didn't destroy Verigenics. I simply stopped preventing them from destroying themselves. And that, as it turns out, was worth more than all the innovation in the world. My final LinkedIn post on the anniversary of my termination was simple. 1 year ago, I was told my expertise was outdated and my position was replaceable. Today, I lead a team of 7 at a company that values compliance as innovation's partner, not its enemy. To everyone who's been undervalued, overlooked, or replaced by someone's spouse, your expertise matters. Document everything, know your worth, and remember the best revenge is a success they can't replicate. #Compliance Matters. Section 9b. Know your worth. It got 12,000 likes, 500 shares, and one very interesting comment from a username I didn't recognize. Some lessons cost $400 million to learn. Gee, I didn't respond. Some messages are better left on read. Just like some expertise is better appreciated after it's gone. The market, like justice, eventually finds its level, and I was exactly where I belonged, valued, respected, and holding all the right certifications. Thank you all for listening to this story of corporate karma and compliance catastrophe. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Drop a comment below and let me know if you've ever witnessed innovation theater trump actual expertise in your workplace. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories of professional revenge served ice cold with a side of federal regulations. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying those who wronged you. It's about thriving while they learn exactly what they lost. Share your thoughts below, and let's discuss the Clarissas and Tobis in your own professional lives.